lighting's worse today. Oh well.
Welcome, connoisseurs of fine common cardboard, to today's live stream and to this set review for Commander Masters CMM for cPDH, Competitive Pauper Commander. I've got my good friend Scarecrow here to take a look at all of the incredible commons and uncommons that have been brought into our format in this latest set. It's very exciting. This is
All of them?
yeah, easily some of the, well, we're going to be doing black today. I appreciate the reminder there. We're going to be looking at just black and rare and uncommon, and taking a look at the implications of these cards in our format. And so I'm really stoked to have you here.
Got downshifted?
Yeah, the ones that got downshifted, exactly. So we've got a couple of great cards to cover. But first of all, Scarecrow, appreciate having you here. And how you doing today?
It's always a fun time. Pretty good. I was listening to like Common Theory and PDH Pals before this, so it's just kind of been a very magic day.
Yeah, totally hear that. Yeah, well, this set, I think broadly speaking, has been a huge shakeup for Pauper and for competitive Pauper Commander and for Pauper Commander as a whole, because it's introduced a number of really pretty strong cards into the format, ones that are really strong in context, as well as ones that are just outright busted in some formats that have been brought to common. There's a couple of them that were on my wish list that I maintain for downshifts to common, and a couple that I wanted that I didn't think we would get that we did end up getting. So this is going to be a set that I think we're going to look back on and say, these are some of the most powerful commons ever printed. Quite possibly. Would you say that you've got a similar read on that, Scarecrow?
Just spoiling a little bit of your other streams that you're going to have other guests for. Like, all the glitters is definitely one of those ones that I thought we would never ever get. And then similarly, gutter snipe. I mean, I don't think we're ever going to have a burn engine better than gutter snipe. I would be like, I'm surprised we even got that.
Yeah.
So I'm on the same page with you. There's been a lot of discussion, like on Twitter, about which is going to, in hindsight, be more influential, this or Baldur's Gate. And some people are just like, definitely Baldur's Gate, and I think they're so tunnel visioned on the commanders and just kind of the genericness of initiative. And to me, those kinds of things, like initiative's cool. It gave mid-range and aggro a nice tool, but it's the same everywhere it's used. And then commanders, sure, you build around them, but the other decks can't make use of them. So to me, sets like this, where we're getting a whole toolbox of new tools for the 99, are much more exciting because it boosts a wider variety of decks and archetypes all at the same time.
Yeah, no, it should be worth mentioning that the genericness of even initiative extends beyond aggro and mid-range, because they do serve as combo outlets for flicker decks. But that reinforces its genericness, right? Like, there are things that generically fit in a lot of different places, so it's like a broad power level.
Change from initiative is what I was saying.
Yeah, and I think that you're right to point out that the commanders were really a significant part of Baldur's Gate, that they introduced a huge number of extremely powerful commanders that we kind of see all over the meta. Whereas here, we actually have a lot of bolstering of areas that didn't really get that don't really have a lot of love. And we're going to see that in black in particular, I think, with some of the effects that we've received that are either new or they reinforce other sorts of mechanics that we have. And some of it's generically good as well, but a lot of is more like bolstering specific decks. So with that said, would you like to just dive right into to what we got?
Sure. What you want to? So we kind of have three categories of cards we're looking at. The black uncommons that were downshifted from rare,
Yep.
and we've got some mono black and a few. We can look at the splashes. I'll leave that up to you how many of those we want to do. We've
Sure.
got colorless commons and black commons. So which category do you want to start with?
Yeah, let's start with the commons in black,
Okay.
and we're gonna swap on over here. So the
Yep,
first
that was the
one,
first one I had.
yeah, this is the first one on the list here. Demon's Disciple. This is Fleshbag Marauder, but it is a human cleric. It does have the text to make a player sack a planeswalker. This is not relevant for our format at this present time.
Unless you're playing Pals meta.
Unless you're playing Pals meta. Yep. So this card is essentially just another Fleshbag Marauder, which is always welcome. Being able to reduce the cost of this effect is great. This will probably be, for decks that don't have a ton of slots for edicts, this will probably be replacing Slum Reaper. And in decks maybe where there's some sort of a tribal functionality. In decks where you want to overload on this kind of an effect, it's going to be very good. I could
That's
definitely.
what I was going to say.
I was going to think maybe like Fleshbag Marauder. If we're
this is the fifth Fleshbag Marauder we have.
Yep.
So this is the second one at 3 mana. We've got 2 at 4 mana, Chain Devil and Slum Reaper, and then we've got Rotag Gargantua at 5 mana. And then we've got some others that are like spells that do similar things.
Like Vraska's Fall and Miracle's Edict.
And then we've got Abyssal Gatekeeper. But like those 5 are the ones that give it to you the cleanest.
Yep.
And specifically for decks that want that ability, it feels like we're starting to edge closer and closer to like real saturation. Like in my head, I always think of like 8. That's where you can consistently have one with it by like turn 3 without too much draw power in your deck.
Yeah, I think it's only a matter of time before we get something like this.
Plaguecrafter.
Yeah, Plaguecrafter. And I think that we're likely headed towards that kind of saturation. And it'll do interesting stuff because we have, decks like Mayhem Devil that can really make a lot of use of a card like this. So some of the homes.
Several of the control pieces that we're going to be talking about, I kind of have the same mindset for several of them where like I've been looking at Mahadi for quite a while, wanting to make them and see how they do in a competitive, more controlling setup. And this would be going straight into that and the more the merrier. Like if we get another one, that's great. That's going in there too. Like it's not replacing Slum Reaper, it's going in there alongside it. Yeah, exactly. So the interesting thing about mass edicts is that in the format there's been a proliferation of just creature count, the number of creatures that the average deck is running, and I don't really have data to back this up, but it's what I observe in my games. I think that if we looked at the data, we could probably find some trends that would likely point this direction, which is to say that as creatures have become more common in decks, you have more and more and more of them. I would say
edicts get worse.
I would say that's borne out by just looking at some of the token engines we have. Over the last 4 years, we have gotten an order of magnitude more repeatable token generation that's not just based around ETB or flickering or anything like that.
Yeah, absolutely. We've got decks like Third Path Iconoclast, we've got decks like Gut, True Soul Zealot, paired with either Iron Throne or with the more commonly played Inspiring Leader. We've got decks like Abdel, where making them sacrifice a 1/1 or making them sacrifice Abdel isn't particularly good because it's giving them another cast of the Abdel while returning all those rocks back into play, returning all the non-land permanents that they exiled back into play. So edicts are something that if you have access to them because you're in black, it's good to have them because they are going to help you answer cards that aren't easily killed, and you can orchestrate scenarios in which your edict will work.
And that's kind of why I'm looking at them in more of controlling shells, because that's where you're going to have more of, Mahadi and Mayhem Devil will have access to your 2 and 3 damage board wipes that can clear away the tokens, and then you follow it up with an Edict. I know that's something you were excited talking about whenever we talked about Viscopic Guildmage and the
Yeah.
idea of a more controlling shell for that deck.
Yeah, absolutely. A great home for it is going to be Enthrall Parasite.
Yep.
So if we talk about where this goes, this just simply replaces Slum Reaper. So we'll actually just do this right away here. Demons. So we've got demons.
Disciple.
Yeah, disciple. There we go. And so yeah, this is just lowering the curve and just kind of adding to the efficiency of that sort of an effect. This will also go into decks like Corpse Augur, which I've been looking at again. All of the printing of the cycling cards have made this deck significantly more interesting, having like a massive source of card advantage in the command zone. So a deck like this, Slum Reaper can come out, and Demon's Disciple will go in here.
I'm also seeing other opportunities to make use of it, like Abdel Black. You're going to have a bunch of tokens floating around for you to sack to it, and if it comes in and out a few times, that's all the more profit. Conrad can make use of it. Creatures go into the graveyard, that turns into burn. And then Minthara,
Minthara too. Yep, absolutely. So Mayhem Devil here could do something like Vraska's Fall is a possibility. Chris Lively says, "Can't wait till we get to a certain flashback spell." Yeah, Chris, we're pretty. I'm pretty. I have to admit that certain flashback spell is perhaps one of the most exciting things that was printed during the entire set for me personally, and we'll talk a little bit about why that is. So here in Mayhem Devil, this is going to probably be better than Vraska's Fall because it's actually. It's making us sacrifice a creature as well, which will probably be the...
it's one additional damage.
Yeah, exactly. One additional damage. And it's also another thing that we can get back with things like Witch's Cottage, Mortuary Mire, Blood Fountain, Haunted Fengraf. And on top of that, it's going to at times allow us to upgrade a creature like a Tormented Soul if the unblockability isn't important anymore. Or maybe Impulsive Pilferer to get some usage out of that.
Eat it for the treasure.
Yep, exactly. So I think we like that there. So yeah, there's a couple of different homes for it there. A Denethor is another one that will definitely want this one.
Oh yeah, that's creature dying on your turn. Get a free token.
Exactly. So this is where we would play something. Interesting. Non-token. I was just thinking about that for Chain Devil.
I mean, that's fine. Chain Devil eats stealth. You're still getting
still fine. So this is definitely one where we would want the Demon's Disciple here. So let's bring this one in. I think this is just going to swap in straight across for the Rottide Gargantua here. Oh boy.
I'm actually a big fan of Rottide just for the big body on it.
I love the big body. Yeah, the fact that it's optional is really important, but we always have to keep in mind that the Rottide Gargantua's sacrifice trigger can be nullified if somebody kills it on the stack. It's because it's no longer in play to see that it exploited something, and so if we want something that's really reliable, then we play Demon's Disciple. But I think in this,
what it just costs you an extra creature.
Yeah, exactly. And there could be an argument in this case that Chain Devil really wants to be
in a deck that's not so token focused.
Yeah, because we're making human tokens, but it's usually not a problem. It's just that it will have to sacrifice itself in some cases. So Demon's Disciple this is just a really good upgrade in terms of mana efficiency. It's generically like a good black card. And it doesn't bolster any particular archetype, so to say, but it really does just make black a little bit better at doing the control and mid-range thing. So
the other fringe place that I'm curious is kind of along the same vein as Vizkopa. I am curious about trying out Rot Widow Pack and seeing if I can push that towards cPDH viability.
Yeah.
And because it works in the same kind of symmetrical burn
Yeah,
And
yeah.
specifically, the edicts are a very powerful tool for that because toss it in your yard and immediately eat it for a burn trigger.
Right, right. There's a couple of other places as well. Gray Merchant of Asphodel. It's
Hmm.
possible also that Golem would like to run them because it would actually sacrifice Golem with some sort of a
Yep,
Gray
so you can
Flicker.
get more
Um,
ring.
yeah, Gut plus Throne
Yep.
could also potentially run it, though Edicts are not a significant part of that deck. So yeah,
I
lots
mean,
of different
it's
places
like
for it to go.
it's like towards the end of the game because
Yeah.
Gut Throne can be pretty turbo in terms of how fast it brings down life totals,
Yep.
and then you just need that little bit of disruption at the end to keep people from doing what they want while you finish them.
Right, right. I think there's even an argument in Cardour that you really just want to load up on all these
Mhm.
mass edicts because, so this will be something I'll be coming back to at some point. Basically, cutting some of this removal here to add in these mass edicts because that's just going to minimize the amount of interaction with the monarch or the initiative that you end up
Yeah.
receiving. So,
For Carter, it's an interesting idea because you normally like my build of Carter is much more let the enemy build up, and I don't play as much removal because I want them to have more creatures going at each other because it's built for a combat meta.
mhm.
But at the same time, edicts don't seem that bad for that because if people are getting rid of their less valuable creatures, they're probably getting rid of chump blockers, which means things are more likely to connect for damage.
Right, right. Absolutely. Yeah. I think that's definitely the case. So Demon's Disciple, great card. Let's move on to
Mhm.
the next one here, and this is the most exciting card for me of the entire set. Dread Return has been on my downshift wish list for somewhere around 5 or 6 years, and it
This was
wasn't
another one of
because
those that I never thought we'd get.
it wasn't one that I thought we would get. I thought we would just get a Zombify. We would get
Mhm.
some Zombify Plus type
My
card.
my stretch goal was the Golgari. You remember War of the Spark? They had
Yeah, it
the
was
like
called.
two guild uncommons, and it was like a 5-drop reanimation spell that also gives them haste. Like to me, one of those more expensive reanimation plus haste spells. That was like my reach goal for a
Yeah, yeah,
reanimator in my head.
the five
Like,
mana. I know I know the one you're talking about. Chris says, "Woohoo! This is going to be a problem card in 60 Popper." Absolutely. So just to give you all a little context, when I used to play quite a bit of Popper, and when I played Popper, one of my favorite and beloved archetypes was Turbo Reanimator, Rakdos and Mardu Turbo Reanimator. Putting an Ulamog's Crusher into play on turn one was just about the most fun thing I could possibly imagine doing in Magic. And Dread Return is going to be um, busted. This card is as close to a black staple as I think you can get. It's allowing
like
us
yours.
to reuse ETBs in black, and those ETBs are very, very good. Whether it's edicts, whether it's initiative, monarch, Gary, some sort of extort effect that we can start to abuse. And the fact that we get it twice potentially is phenomenal. This card is going to be extremely strong in Golem, um, and it's just cracked. It's basically Zombify plus. Um, Not to mention 60 card. 60 card is its own thing. Being able to Dark Ritual into this is going to be very good. Turn one, cycle away a Troll of Khazad-dûm or Faithless Looting away a Ulamog's Crusher and a Dragon's Breath. Turn two, Swamp, Dark Ritual, Dread Return, bring it back, blow up your opponent's only lands. In our format, this card is going to be significantly more fair. Um, it's possible that it could be used with some sort of to loop an Archaeomancer, maybe in some sort of a Rakdos kind of a deck. But
I was imagining it be more of combo backup. Like you'd go for your loop, someone nukes Peregrine Drake with a snuff out, and then you just dread return it, and you're
yeah,
back in business.
yeah, that's certainly possible. The fact that you can mill over your yard is huge. Dread Return is notably used in Cephalid Breakfast combo in
Yep.
Legacy, where you have Cephalid Illusionists, and then I think it's a Nomad, and then there's also stuff with the Shuko, which is the free equipment. And basically, the way that works is that you mill your deck into your yard, and then you dread return your Narcomoebas, and you basically you go infinite, and you combo off right then and there. And so Dread Return tends to be a combo card in that role, but I think
Like
in our
Derek,
format, it's going to be just very fair.
Derek on Twitter was joking about using a Cephalid Nomad and Core, I think it was, combo to mill your library and then dread returning Lot Left Giant to just murder someone.
You could totally do that. Yeah.
And that's needs Esper colors, but it's pretty good.
Yeah,
And then you
certainly.
just ephemerate it to kill someone else, and then if the last person can't kill you, then on your upkeep you get rid of them too.
Right. I like the idea of this being a backup if you're in Esper or in Grixis or in any black blue based combo deck, the ability to have a Dread Return in your deck that allows you to really go for broke in getting back a Peregrine Drake or some sort of Archaeomancer.
Yep.
This is going to be a card that you could consider playing, and certainly worth one considering for just about every mid-range black deck I can imagine.
Yeah.
This is a very strong card.
I'm also curious to see how this works with combat threats. Like my big kind of trend that I see with this set is that it's very good for combat threats in PDH as a whole. You've got red removal stapled to large bodies. You've got more Reanimator. You've got you've got several very large beaters in different colors. So I'm hoping that this continues to creep like big combat beats and big value creatures one step closer. And I think this could be part of that, specifically because in the right deck that has lots of token generation, Dread Return can act as card advantage because you're getting 2 cards back from the grave.
Totally. Imagine this in Abdel. In Abdel, the ability to bring back, our Tiefling Warrior that flickers as part of our combo, or to bring back a Mirkwood Bats. There's so many different ways that Dread Return is going to be really effective, especially because you can, there's also the ability to bring back like a Dimir House Guard. And then if you have the Mirkwood Bats in play, then you can sacrifice all your tokens on the spot and basically end the game. So this is going to have fair usages. It's going to have very explosive, unfair usages. There may be combo avenues for it, although I think I'm less certain about that. But generally speaking, a card that is going to be really insane in 60 card, making those Rakdos decks not have to splash into white. Traditionally, they had to splash into white for more copies of reanimation spells. So because we really only had Exhume, and that wasn't particularly good. We had Summon Undead as well, but Summon Undead being 5 mana is a pretty bad rate. Rough. Yeah, you need
Summon
4 mana stuff.
Summon Undead's niche is that it doesn't matter if they nuke your yard, you still get that
you still will mill
before it goes off, and it's not targeted. So even if they nuke your yard before it resolves, you still will have 3 cards to choose.
You still may hit a creature is kind of the idea there. So Dread Return, this is the one I was most excited about. This is the one where I was sitting at the festival. For those of you who don't know, I was at Shambhala Music Festival up in British Columbia from Wednesday onward. And as the set started to drop, I saw this one and I was so thrilled. This is going to make me want to play 60 card Pauper again, because Rakdos Reanimator is going to be absolutely sweet. Being able to play 8 of these, I'll probably have to go more creature heavy, things like the Insolent Neonate and other cards that allow you to provide some fodder, maybe even Stinkweed Imp type stuff, where we can sacrifice them to get the second cast on
Fill
this.
up your grave at the same time.
Yeah, exactly. So there's Dread Return. Let's move on to the next one here. We have Drown in Sorrow.
Back to what I was saying about control shells and them getting new tools, and how I think that's part of why this set is going to be very influential when looking
Yeah.
back at it.
Yeah.
So all our other -2/-2 wipes in black are all 4 mana, and that plus the just a little bit of additional value for Scry 1. To me, that puts this it makes it worth playing over the one-sided one that we got
So
2 sets
Arms of
ago.
Hadar
There we
is
go.
the one we're talking about, and that one's 4 mana. You don't have to splat. It's a
Yeah,
3 and a
1 hit.
black, so it's a little easier to splash. It only hits our opponent's creatures. I think that Drown in Sorrow doesn't so much replace Arms of Hadar, because Arms of Hadar is actually a card that aggressive decks can play as well, where
So
they
it would be
don't lose their
blockers.
own stuff. What this replaces is Eye Blight Massacre in
Yeah,
most
the elf
not
one.
in non-elf decks. If you're
And
playing
sometimes
Abomination of
Gangrene zombies.
Llanowar, obviously you play the one-sided Wrath. But this one
Like,
here, yeah, it's
this
gonna,
one, I'm really looking forward to slotting into Vizkopa. It's already running Arms of Hadar, but I
yep,
think this does replace it, specifically because the way that deck works a lot of the early game is ramp and getting to the point where you can double spell. And right when you get to being able to double spell, you don't necessarily have a lot of creatures on board. As soon as
right.
you can double spell, that's when you start deploying creatures to the board more. So being able to Wrath and then play your first creature to board after playing a draw spell and a rock and another rock sounds pretty good.
Yeah, yeah. I think the question will be like how vulnerable do we want our extort creatures to be to our own
Mm-hmm.
spells, which is one of the reason why we have the Arms of Hadar as the choice for that one. We also do play Pestilence and Crypt Rats, but the main reason there being that Crypt Rats can be given lifelink, and Pestilence and Crypt Rats both do damage to face
Yep.
as well. So they're both like game-ending cards that can also help us reset the board if things are getting kind of hectic.
Mm-hmm.
This Drown in Sorrow card is going to see a ton of play in black-based control decks, because being 3 mana is putting it on parity with Fiery Cannonade and Breath Weapon, which is a really big deal. The Scry is just cherry on top. If this was just 3 mana, all creatures get -2/-2, we'd still be playing the crap out of it. So this is going to have a lot of great homes in decks like Thrall Parasite. It's going to be good in basically any deck that has bigger creatures that wants a sweeper.
Do you think you would ever put it in Witherbloom Apprentice? It kills Apprentice, and I'm not sure if that's worth it or not.
Yeah, so Witherbloom Apprentice and Thrall Parasite largely want to play the same cards for the same reasons. So the fact that Drown in Sorrow does kill Thrall Parasite doesn't really matter that much, because Thrall Parasite is so cheap, so easily recastable. It does play sweepers, and it does play sweepers that kill Thrall Parasite. The other thing is that we have Opal Palace in Thrall Parasite, so
Yeah,
we're
and
actually quite fine with losing it.
that's
And
why I
then,
was
yeah.
that's why I was asking about Witherbloom specifically, because if I remember correctly, Witherbloom runs less ramp than Thrall Parasite, right?
Yeah, it runs less ramp primarily because the ramp comes at the cost of card advantage or interaction. Whereas in Thrall Parasite, we actually get to play mana rocks, which
Right.
are,
Trigger extort.
yeah, they trigger extort. They also have draw on them. Like, we have cards like Bonder's Ornament. We have cards like Network Terminal, Infernal Idol, things like that allow us to draw cards from our mana base. So yeah, Witherbloom Apprentice, despite costing twice as much as Thrall Parasite, also runs less ramp. So it would play a card like this, because 3 mana is just so important. It's like, it's not tutorable with Dimir Houseguard, but those decks that play Dimir Houseguard already have multiple things that they can tutor it for. Arms of Hadar, Pestilence, Evankar's Justice. There's just a long list of them. So Drown in Sorrow is phenomenal. And if this is any indicator of what we're going to continue to get, I think that a lot of, what you were talking about, where it's like mid-range and control are going to be the large beneficiaries of the set. I do think that that's a really astute observation. And I can even tell when I'm looking at some of the cards in other colors, like in blue and in red, where I'm looking at it and saying, why am I even trying to do a soft combo in TPI if I can just play like Talarian Terror, Cryptic Serpent, Gearseeker Serpent, Gutter Snipe, and then just cut
Yeah.
and then just cut the Curiosity, because
And
like that
not
that basically streamlines the deck. You're no longer having to search for this A plus B kind of a thing. You actually just get to play generically powerful mid-range cards, and all of those cards allow you to attack with your blockers at your side, right?
And with a slightly less competitive tilt, I'm playing around with a mono red shell right now, and I don't know who the best commander for it is. Red Dragon from the first Adventures in the Forgotten Realms set, just 6-drop 4/4 flyer, ETB, 4 damage to each opponent.
Yep.
Or Storm Killed Artisan,
Yep.
something like that.
Storm Killed Artisan.
Spell casting gives you a treasure. But the idea for the shell of the deck is we've reached such a density of symmetrical burn triggered abilities and activated abilities, whether it's things like Brimstone, the little goblin. There's the ones that tap
Blister Spit Gremlin.
There, thank you, Gremlin.
Yep.
There's the ones that tap to deal damage to everyone, and then there's the trigger from Artifact ETB, or casting a non-creature spell, or casting an instant or sorcery, or creature ETB. Like, we have such a density of those.
Yeah.
I'm trying to see if I can put together a shell that's a lot of spell slinging that also generates artifact and creature tokens to trigger. So maybe you can't always get an artifact one. Maybe you can't always get a spell triggered one. But if your spells are consistently triggering 2 of those categories, you should always be able to have 1 or 2 symmetrical pingers in play on top of the ones that tap deal damage to.
Right.
And that should add up very quickly. And then do you also get another engine in the command zone, like the treasure generation, or do you just get like a big splashy in-game thing where people have used their removal on your pingers, and now you just, here's another 4 off the top, and I have a combat threat.
Totally. So, the new Monarch Dragon would be a great example of a good home for that, where you have an engine for creating bodies, but you also have an engine for drawing cards. And so, I mean, as we approach this increased, this sort of, it's something we're always going to be doing in a sense, but approaching this like nadir of like continued density of replicate effects, this format is going to become increasingly more consistent, and it's going to be very clear what these decks are trying to do, and like what their avenue of attack is. And you don't
have to stop halfway through brewing a deck because you ran out of the cards.
You're not going to run into that. No, there's not going to be a whole lot of it. And so I'll be interested to see what effect this has on some of the decks I like to work on. Like TPI in particular is going to be a really interesting adjustment. I personally just don't really enjoy playing combo all that much. And I find that even the Curiosity combo is like this thing that basically threatens the pingers that I have in a way that they otherwise might not be. Like, pingers are
2 for 1 and draws too much attention sometimes.
Yeah. And sometimes I just want that pinger to keep doing damage. So I won't cast my Ophidian Eye, I won't cast my Tandem Lookout, because I know that if I do, we're going to run into a scenario where somebody says, now I can't let that happen, and then I lose 2 cards for 1, or I have to cast a counter spell to protect it. And I'd almost rather just keep running these things out and continue doing damage, and then playing creatures that are going to be able to attack.
If that Ophidian Eye was yet another pinger because you have such a density of them, then maybe people don't have enough removal for both, or even just like staring at 3 of them, they're like, is it worth even spending removal on one of them, or do I just have to find a way to win first? And then they do something reckless and you get them.
Exactly. And that also means that instead of having to protect my pingers as part of this combo with my counter spells, I can be using the counter spells more reactively or proactively I can be using them for different things. I don't have to sit on them for the purpose of that thing. It might even mean that, the protection spells that I have would become counter spells, because I'm not actually trying to protect, this Ophidian Eye thing. But we've drifted off course a little bit here. I'm going to bring us back to black. But it's all this to say that Drown in Sorrow fills that same thing, where it's like Gutter Snipe and some of these other cards where we're getting replicate effects, and some of them are reduced mana. The Demon's Disciple is 3. That's just another Fleshbag Marauder. Drown in Sorrow is like Eyeblight Massacre, but it's 3. So it's 1 less, and we're getting a Scry. So I think we're going to see not only a pattern of more replicate effects, almost certainly, but they're going to come with little little bonuses, little cherry on top to give that. So Drown in Sorrow is obviously going to be a total pain in the ass for TPI. It's going to be very good against Abdel, and it's going to be really, really hard on gut-based decks because this is a deployable answer in a black-based combo deck that can really set them back pretty hard by killing gut and all of its creatures that it made. So Drown in Sorrow. The next one we're going to look at here is Nadir's Nightblade. And we're going to come back and look at the other ones too. But yeah, this is 3 mana, 1/3. Whenever a token you control leaves the battlefield, each opponent loses 1, you gain 1. This card is going to be so good in Mayhem Devil.
Yeah, Mayhem Devil, Mahadi, same control shells we were
yeah.
talking about. Yep.
And I think also I've been thinking a lot about the sort of Westworld Abdel Agent of the Iron Throne white-black builds, and I think that this is also going to be great in those decks as well, because really I think what that deck wants to do is it wants to have like a Mirkwood Bat or this Nadir's Nightblade, and it wants to sacrifice a bunch of its 1/1s to like burn the table out.
Even just a Falkenrath Noble still burns.
Yeah, so Falkenrath Noble would kill at least one person.
Yeah, because it's so many tokens.
Yeah, exactly. So the most clear home for this is definitely Mayhem Devil. Mahdi also very good. Mahdi makes a lot of treasures. That's part of it. It's a huge amount of treasure tokens that it creates.
Gut Throne would also
Gut Throne. Yeah.
And then also what's the I can never remember his name. The legendary when you move to combat, I think it generates like a 2/1, and then if you've had 3-4 creatures die this turn, you tap it to 2 or something.
Yeah, Legamos. Yeah. So that would be another one.
Because of the consistent token production, if you don't go the combo route with that, maybe this enables our growing density of black aristocrat effects could help that deck become a mid-range version that's viable. Same thing with the red sacrifice aspirant that came out this set. So there's a lot of pieces moving towards aristocrat, mid-range, and Rakdos colors being a lot more powerful without necessarily having to have your drain in the command zone.
Exactly. Yeah, and what we have to do when we see a card like this is that this card can have haste because it's able to get in damage the moment it arrives. And every time you sacrifice a token, right? It has it kind of has haste. It kind of has like a weird form of lifelink. And it also swings above its weight class. If you sacrifice 2 treasures when this comes in, it's a hasty 6-power lifelinker in a sense.
Speaking of sacrificing treasures, Kalain would also love this.
Oh yeah, for sure. So Nadir's Nightblade, again, this is like a very specific niche home, but this sort of effect, these black pinging, is huge. Especially for aggressive decks, because aggressive decks increasingly want to be attacking one player while pinging everybody else. And so that when they need to turn the corner after killing the player they're attacking, they're not doing so from 30 life. They're doing so from maybe 20 or 15, where that person has already taken a little bit of incidental damage, and it's a little easier then to carry your momentum over and actually win the game. And so a card like Nadir's Nightblade is going to be very good in those mid-range and aggressive decks that want to be applying pressure to everybody while attacking one person. So the other
one last note on that.
Oh yeah. Go ahead.
So Puzzle and Gator on Common Theory, they had their set review, and I was listening to it, and there were a lot of things they said I disagreed with, but one thing they pointed out that I hadn't thought of specifically with Nightblade is the fact that because it leaves the battlefield, it works on bounce. So if you get Echoing Truth or something like that, Nightblade still goes off.
Oh, interesting. So this is like this is almost like a Hissing Iguanar, where it's like punishing your opponents for a deterrent. Yeah, they have to get through this before they can use the Echoing Truth or the Echoing Decay. Yeah, that's really good for sure. You could imagine a scenario where somebody goes for Echoing Truth or Echoing Decay against like
against Gut Throne.
Yeah, against Gut Throne or Gut Leader.
And Gut Leader can't have this, but yeah.
Well, it can if the Inspiring Leader isn't in play. Um, oh, I see, because it's
No,
black. Yeah, yeah,
just
yeah.
color identity.
So it's just, yeah, color identity. Yep. So the Iron Throne, this would be a great deterrent in that, where they have to get through this first. So, yeah, great card. The last one that I wanted to discuss is Phyrexian Gargantua. This was also on my downshift wish list. Just as a generic source of card draw that also comes on a reasonable body. I really
4/4 is nothing to scoff at.
It's nothing to scoff at. Yeah, this is a blocker. This is an attacker. It more than replaces itself, and it's a card that we can reuse over and over again. If it does die, we can get it back with things like Blood Fountain and Witch's Cottage, Mortuary Mire, Haunted Fengraf. I think this card is ripe for your mid-range and control decks that want to have bodies attached to card advantage. And black does eventually run out of these draw two effects that you actually want to play. You start getting into these like 4 mana sorcery, instant speed, draw two kind of things. And I would rather pay 6 and get the 4/4 than pay 4 and draw 2 cards. We've got Alex Scott in the chat. Says, "What's up, guys? Good to see you, man. Glad to have you here."
I was joking on Twitter. I forget who it was. Maybe it was the pals, but I was joking with them saying, "Yeah, it's just a black mold drifter. No big deal, guys."
Yeah, I mean that's exactly what it is. We don't have an evoke to cheapen it, which would be very cool if we did.
That's
but
fine, because we have an easier time recurring it because we're in black.
Because we're in black, exactly. So I don't think this card is like wildly standout. It's not like going to be turning heads. It's just generically good black mid-range control. Yep. It's going to be a card that you see in decks like Gary, decks like Thrall Parasite. You can see there's a bit of a trend here. Thrall Parasite's getting a lot of really good stuff in this set here that is just making it generically better.
Yeah. Little off topic. I'm looking forward to playing it around with Golgari's Ramp Stomp Brews in mid power, and this is definitely going to be a nice card for that, because Stomp's big problem is always card advantage.
Right. So this is what we had before. Was a 6 mana 4/5 that drew a card and lost this 1 life. You can see that this is like that this is a pretty significant upgrade in my mind. Drawing an additional card for 1 toughness is fine, and it's also comparable to cards like First Sphere Gargantua. Now First Sphere Gargantua is a little unique in that the Unearth really puts it into a lot of different decks.
Extra
like this
grape synergies.
Yeah, like this goes great in any black-based tempt deck, because you're able to loot this away and then cast it as a hasty 5/4 that draws a card. So not only did you break parity on the Unearth by getting a card into your graveyard that you can still cast from there, but it's also going to draw you that card. So
yeah. Plus Sir Conrad or Tormod getting burned.
Yeah.
Or tokens off of it.
Absolutely. So this is just a good card. I'm really happy to see it. It's a card that I wanted to see downshifted. I think it's a perfectly reasonable downshift, unlike Dread Return, which is an unreasonable downshift.
Yeah.
I'm stoked for it. I'm always here for it. But like if we're talking about things that are, like
solid
how
cards that they stretch.
Yeah.
They push. They bring up the floor of our format without increasing the ceiling.
Yep, exactly. And this is kind of that. It's very fair. It's very generic. There are other cards that got downshifted as well, and what I want to point out is really like Carrion Grub, Lotleth Giant, Mire Triton, and Witch's Cauldron are kind of playing towards the same thing, which is this black self-mill kind of thing. So talking about these generically, these are great cards. They can go in decks like Corpse Augur, they can go in Sir Conrad. Mire Triton just has Death Touch on it. It also gains a little bit of life. Mire Triton in Corpse Augur is exactly what the deck wants. We're milling creatures into our yard. We're gaining life. That deck is always contained by its life gain. So can you gain life?
2 years ago, we had almost no reasonably priced creatures with self-mill in black.
Yeah.
And we've gotten so much in the last few years.
And it's got Death Touch. I mean,
and life gain.
And life gain. There's a lot of packaged value in this Mire Triton. What's up, Gator? Good to see you, buddy.
Once again, not competitive, but Molder Hulk wants that like crazy. The life gain is relevant because it's
Maybe.
a little bit of a slow death.
Yeah, who knows,
No,
right?
no, that definitely wants Molder Hulk wants that in a heartbeat.
Alex says, are you saying you aren't hyped for Dread Return? I must have heard that wrong. You did. Yes, I am extraordinarily excited for Dread Return. Dread Return is a busted card, and it's very pushed, and it's a card that I had on my wish list, but it was kind of like in that like fever dream wish list of like, oh, maybe someday we get Dread Return, ha ha ha, and then we did. And I'm stoked for 60 card. I'm going to be probably playing Reanimator only, and you know, yeah, that's just probably how that works. But Mire Triton's great. Lotleth Giant. We'll just talk about this briefly. This is great.
Target.
Yeah, this is a great reanimation target. It's also going to be very good in Corpse Augur. It's going to be good in Sir Conrad. Very good in Sir Conrad. This card with Dread Return is very scary.
This is stupid, hyper casual idea that I've had ever since I got into the format was building Disciple of Deceit.
Yep.
Reanimator, where you discard big creatures, reanimate them, and this is absolutely perfect for that. It's a dumb, slow idea, but we finally have enough high-cost beaters to where you can have enough in the deck that you consistently draw one to discard to go get another.
Yeah, and it's important to mention too that one of the exciting things about Lotleth Giant is that it's come paired along with all of these creatures that cycle very efficiently into the graveyard that have been part of my deck building strategy of late.
Which is why I mentioned Raw Widow Pack earlier, because my build is very, very, very ramp and cycling focused as opposed to self mill.
Yeah, this one here.
Because even if you have an empty yard and someone's holding up Grave Hate over you, you cycle a creature, and as soon as that creature's in the graveyard as part of the cost, and the cycling triggers on the stack, you just hold priority and eat the creature with Raw Widow Pack, and there is no chance for Grave Hate.
Yeah, that definitely makes a lot of sense. This is another niche card. Again, this is feeding these black-based graveyard decks that have lots of creatures, and these decks that probably want to be reusing them as well, and decks that want to play a lot of those cycling creatures. So like Lotleth Giant could even be a top-end threat in this build of Mr. Orfeo that I'm working on right now, where, because there's a lot of creatures that basically what I'm building there is instead of playing draw spells, I'm actually playing creatures that cycle.
Yeah, increasing your card quality.
Yep, increasing the card quality. We're cheapening the card draw, and we're cycling cards into the yard, and then we can get them back later on, or we could profit off of them with something like Lotleth Troll. So
like talking about Lotleth Giant in more of an aristocrat.
Or Giant, yeah.
So like a lot of aristocrat stuff in black is symmetrical terrain. So Lotleth Giant can be a little awkward with that if everyone's at the same life total. Knocking one person down isn't as helpful and can actually be politically harmful. But in stomp decks like Orfeo, knocking one person down just goes right alongside your attack.
It does.
Knock that person down and then attack them to kill them, or knock this person down and then attack someone else. Like it all makes perfect sense together.
Totally. And this is also another payoff in Zhao. I'm not going to pronounce it right, but Zhahudun, which is the 4-mana.
Zhahudun is always how I said it.
Yeah, it's the let's see if we can find it here. It's going to be that very old looking. Oh, it's going to find everything Phyrexian.
Exile itself, I think.
Let's see. Yeah, you get a black card back from your graveyard.
Just add type legend.
There we go.
Oh, there it is. The one.
Yeah, I don't know how to pronounce this here, but basically sacrifice or return a black card. Activate only during your turn before attackers are declared. So, so this is another payoff for that deck, which is heavily creature based. It has benefited a lot from all these creature cyclers. And so definitely something to pay attention to as well, where if you can make infinite mana with Songs of the Damned, then you can cast the Lotleth Troll over and over and over, or the Lotleth Giant over and over again, and burn everybody out of the table. So it's another win condition in that deck, which is great. So let's go.
If that deck ever really gets off the ground, and becomes truly viable, I have a friend that I'm sending it straight to because he was like one of the friends that originally got me to switch over fully from like kitchen table casual to EDH,
Oh, sure.
and he had a Chainer Dementia Master deck
Oh,
that was just a brutal mono black control
yep,
leading into like devotion win cons
yep.
with Gary and stuff like that. And Zihao-Dun was one of his absolute favorite cards in the deck.
Yeah, absolutely. So the last two cards we're going to point out here are Legion Vanguard. Um, this card seems perfectly reasonable.
Mhm.
It's a very cheap,
Built I
infinite.
built it as a commander back before we had all the sack to draw card stuff at common.
Right.
Trying to eke out card advantage, it was awful. I am actually really curious to see if I can find a home for it. I have a soft spot for it.
Yeah, yeah. It's a card that grows itself. It does so with a colorless activated
Mhm.
cost. It is a
And it's
sack
cheap instant
outlet.
speed
It's
sack.
instant
Yeah.
speed. It's cheap. It's giving us card advantage or card selection. Um, and so I think this is a great card. It doesn't make the top five for our purposes because
I
again, it's
would
not as clear kind of where this card could go. But
I would
there's
say it's
definitely
actually
homes.
the weakest of the 10. Like there were the top four, then there were our like honorable mentions, and then there's Legion Vanguard.
Yeah,
But it's
yeah.
still an interesting card.
And what's
I'm very
interesting
happy
is
to
that
have
it's still a 2/2 for 2 that
it. Yep.
has a lot of the things we're looking for, which is it's instant speed, it's cheap and generically costed, it's a
Yep.
sack outlet, it doesn't sack itself, and it also grows itself and provides card advantage. So it's a very
Well,
good
card
card.
selection.
Yeah,
Most
it's
well,
or
half and half.
well, so the card advantage is that if you reveal the top card and it's a land, then you get to put it into your hand. So that is card
Right.
advantage. But the
Sometimes.
yeah, so it's going to be you know. eh,
It's kind of like calling Explorer's Scope card advantage. It's what we used to settle for, but
Yeah, yep.
it's not what you're going to slot in place of a draw spell.
Totally. And then the last one here is Carrion Grub, which is a 4 mana zero
Just a
five.
beater.
Yep, just a beater. It does mill again, which is fantastic for Sir Conrad. Um, I think this card is great. This is going to be just another good card in Sir Conrad. It's possible, we'll play this in Corpse Augur as well. Yeah. Alex asks, maybe Cycle Storm might grab Dread Return, or do you think that you'll go for a more dedicated Reanimator deck? Um,
Oh, and 60 card popper?
Cycle Storm could play Dread Return. The trouble, I mean, yeah, you could. You could. It would be to bring back like it would be in the case where you have more mana than you have things to do with it, um, and mana tends to be a pretty restrictive part of that deck. But I think that what I'm more interested in is just a dedicated reanimator. I want to go turn one, faithless looting, pitch my big fatties, and then turn to dark ritual or culling the weak into something big. Maybe go like um, insolent neonate. Turn two insolent neonate, culling the weak, make the 4 mana, cast that. Something along those lines. Just like that, really turbo reanimator is really appealing to me. I've always played the deck to the very edge of turbo. When I'm playing 60 card, I'm much more interested in linear combo related decks because they're quite a bit better in those cases. They're in 1v1 you want to be going as hard and fast as you can oftentimes as possible, because there's nobody else to help you. Whereas in 60 card, or sorry, in multiplayer, that sort of thing has consequences. Everybody's kind of waiting for you to do your thing and they're watching you. So yeah, definitely interested in the reanimator angle. Explorer is such a strange mechanic. Yeah, Explorer is
I
pretty strange. It's not one of my
honestly,
favorites.
so you know the storm scale. Uh, Part of what they factor in with that is the popularity of mechanics, right? And one of the things I've always been interested in is this idea that the popularity isn't necessarily based on the core of the mechanic, it's also how good a job they did of balancing it with the rest of the set. For example, look at Adamant in the first Eldraine. Like, it felt like the rest of the set was so crazy, and then Adamant was dumbed down to the point where it was balanced the old boring way where
Yep.
it wasn't like it was okay and limited and awful everywhere else. And I feel like Explore was kind of the same way. Like
Yep.
unless you had like the Grove Walker that gained you a bunch of life and got +1/+1 counters when you explored, unless you had like something like that was a very, very, very dedicated payoff, nothing else was really making Explore shine. And I would be really interested to see, now that they're deep into fire design, them having some of these less popular because they powered them down mechanics make a return, and seeing what they can do to play with them.
Yeah.
And
Yeah. To
Explore
push them.
because Explore because it's so odd and variable. I would really be interested in seeing what happens if we got more density of it and we could build more dedicated decks around
And a bigger payoff, because
it. Yeah.
because what I see with the Explorer is frequently that, like, if it's a non-land, oftentimes we're drawing cards because we want action. And so the
Yep.
idea of putting it into the graveyard to get a counter is not something I really like.
Yep.
And so, yeah, you can draw lands with it, but it feels like a mechanic that I'd like to see them push a bit, to make it more relevant, by making adding some other text to it that rewards you for, that properly rewards you for taking a card that you want in your hand and putting it into the graveyard. That's a cost, because if the next card down is a land, well, it depends on whether you want lands or not. But like a lot of times I'm looking for action. So that's where Explorer is a little bit weird. The last card we're going to point out here is Witch's Cauldron. What I like about this card is that you're gaining life, you're drawing a card off of a creature. It can't do it multiple times per turn, but this is very inexpensive. Comes down on turn 1. It's not the kind of thing that you can easily kill. So this is something that potentially could see play in Corpse Augur as well, and the ability to just draw a card.
Can you pull up Bushmeat Poacher?
Yep, this is a great comparison.
So Bushmeat Poacher is the cheapest to activate of this same ability that we have that's around, but notice the cost of the creature. So the real strength of the Witch's Cauldron is cheap to play, cheap to activate, because everything else we have that has that, right? Like Spark Reaper is what you want.
That's what I call it, yeah.
Yeah. All the others other than Bushmeat Poacher all cost 3.
Yep.
Including like Gibbering Barricade, whatever the demon was that came out in 40K. They all cost 3. Some of the demon, Thraxidemon, I think.
Oh yeah.
But they all cost 3.
Yeah.
So the point is, it's cheap to play, cheap to activate, and it's not vulnerable to board wipes.
Yeah, and you know what? Gator made a really interesting point that I had not considered, which is that because
the Abdel.
Yeah, with Abdel. Yeah, Abdel, Agent of the Iron Throne. You can go infinite with that. That's really quite interesting.
By flickering it because it gets around the tap.
Yep, it'll get around the tap. Yeah, the fact that it's 1 mana also means it's tutorable with Trinket Mage, which is important. Potentially Dizzy Spell if that's what somebody's doing. But yeah, I mean it's not making our top 10 because again its homes are pretty narrow, or top 5 because its homes are pretty narrow. But it's a good card, and I think that its cost is something that is going to be appealing to people if they do want that source of card draw, sacrifice. The life gain is incidental, but
and then the last way I see it being useful, I know a lot of people, Gator, are really down on Oubliette, but if you're the kind of person like me that really wants to have as little chance as possible of being locked out of a game, this isn't the worst piece of insurance to have if your deck is weak against Oubliette and you want to be able to stack your commander if you need.
It's basically like an on-board Deadly Dispute. It's not as good, or maybe Reckoner's Bargain. It's not as good as that, but it's repeatable, and it's uncounterable in a sense, because once it's out, it's... this is not the... I will often describe a card like this as uncounterable, because nobody's going to counter this on the way down. Right? Maybe in an Abdel Iron Throne deck, if people, find that this is a really busted, way to execute on that. But yeah, so it's going to be just 2 mana, prevent your commander from being oublietted, unlock it from a, Frogify or a Witness Protection or something like that. In a lot of cases too, this is going to read, don't put that card on my card, because I'm just going to draw a card and get it back.
You're going to 0 for 1 yourself.
Yeah, exactly. So it'll kind of read, kind of like Unstable Obelisk, where people are like, if you have it in play, you're less likely to get oublieted or to get some sort of,
Hmm.
nasty permanent put down on your thing, because you can always just get rid of it. And people
Yeah,
don't like
they
that. They want
know
their card to go the distance, right?
they're just doing a tempo play instead of actual
Yeah,
removal.
exactly. So that's all the commons that were downshifted. Now let's hop on over
For
to,
black anyway.
for black, yep, for the downshifted mono black uncommon creatures. And the ones that seem the most clear to me, and the first one is Gonti.
Yep.
This card is going to be a lot of fun to play. I think there's going to be builds of this that will be casual, and there will be builds of this that are competitive. And
So
either way, it's card advantage in the command zone that deters attackers and has double black pip. It's also a card that pairs well with Grave Flickers. If you're able to say Grave Flicker, it resolves, and then you go Fleshbag Marauder, and you just loop it to get another card back, then not only are you recovering that card, but you're also potentially hampering people's combos in a really
yep.
significant way. If you get a
So if
Ghostly
you
Flicker
don't
off this.
you don't have to play it. You can leave it in exile for the rest of the
Yep.
game.
Uh-huh. Just keep it.
So I actually have a Gonti EDH deck that I've really enjoyed playing for many years, and it is hard control. Lots and lots of big black ramp, big board wipes.
Yep.
And the thing you said about some builds are going to be casual and some are competitive, and Gator and Puzzle kind of said the same thing in their review, where they didn't think it would be good for casual. I actually love Gonti in EDH, and I'm looking forward to trying the same in PDH, because you can take the same deck into more competitive and less competitive
Yeah.
pods, and because
Yep.
you're stealing other people's cards, you can very easily conform to the power level of your pod. Because if you're just in a pod with a bunch of green stompy Temmies, great, you're stealing big Temmy
Yep.
creatures and you're playing them yourself. Or if you're in a pod with a bunch of counterspell control decks, great, I just stole a counterspell, I'm going to use it wisely.
I think
Like,
Gonti is
there's
also
so
going to
much
do some
flexibility.
really interesting stuff when compared to like Halo Forager. Um,
Mm,
when I was building Halo Forager, what I realized was that we could play less of all of our categories of cards when it came to
beat other
interaction,
people.
card draw, all that stuff, because the Halo Forager allowed us to take things from other people's yards and
Yep.
to cast them against them. So this is going to allow us to break the color pie in cases by getting counter spells, by getting all sorts of different things, and it'll be quite interesting. I just have a hard time imagining a Gonti, mono black Gonti deck being bad. I guess
Yeah.
that's part of it. It's like it's card advantage, it's stealing cards that might be really important to your opponent. It's got death touch, it survives most 2 damage board wipes.
It's been a
Um,
while since I put Tortex in a deck, but it's going straight in Gonti.
oh yeah, oh yeah, for sure. Yeah, that'll be a lot of fun. So Gonti seems great. The next one is Gorex, the Tomb Shell.
I
This
love
this
this. This
card
is
is
my
so
favorite.
cool. Yeah, this card is really interesting with all the self mill that we've gotten lately.
Mhm.
Very easy to see this being a 2 mana 4/4 Death Touch.
Yep.
And of course, when it's attacking or dying, we're going to start to get
I
back those cards that we exiled.
I am really, really excited to slap Haunted Cloak on this. So imagine it's like turn 4, you played Haunted Cloak on turn 3. Maybe you have like a Land Cycler and a piece of removal in the graveyard. Look up Priest of the Haunted Edge. That's one of my
Oh yeah,
favorite
yep.
creature removals. 0/4, so it survives board wipes, it cares about snow lands, and it's just tap sack it, and it's remove target creature.
Yep.
But so, like, imagine like turn 1 Land Cycler, turn 2 Priest of the Haunted Edge, turn 3 Haunted Cloak, turn 4 you're paying 2 black and math
I
doesn't
guess you'd
quite
have
work
to
there. You need
cycle
something
some
else to
stuff into
turn,
the
but
yard. But I mean,
but
the
the point
point,
is
yeah,
you get at least 2 cards under it. It ETBs and you equip, give it haste and trample with Death Touch, and you're immediately swinging. And the fact that it's swinging immediately means you're accelerating how fast you're getting the card advantage side of it,
yep,
as
yep,
well as presenting a bigger threat to your opponents.
yeah,
And if they remove it, well, you're going to make it cheap and replay it again. So
yeah.
it's a repeatable threat that forces your opponents to use up their removal, but it's also card advantage for you. I am super stoked about this commander.
Yep.
I have no idea if it can be competitive, but I am going to have so much fun with the game
Well,
action surrounding it.
the death touch is both aggressive and defensive, which is great. So it'll have that dynamic ability to, essentially, apply pressure, or to sit back and block while
Yeah. Or
essentially
strap
being
a Viridian Longbow to it.
or put a Viridian Longbow on it. Exactly. So I
The-
don't know. When we're in mono black, there's a lot of really good
yeah.
options, and so the
Just
question is
imagine
like, what is this going to be doing that those ones aren't? But
just
it
imagine
is.
using this to repeatedly recur at Crypt Rats.
Yeah, that's disgusting. Yeah, crypt rats or any edict creature, right?
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, this card is sweet. It's basically giving us a repeatable form of card advantage, and when it dies, so it's like if our opponents kill this, then we're getting more card advantage. So
And
it's a
having
strong
sack
source of card
engines,
advantage.
having sack engines in the deck also makes sense because you need to send things to the grave. Like I imagine Mold Folk would go here.
Absolutely. Definitely an interesting one. I don't know exactly what direction we'd be taking this, but it's very clear to me that we'd be playing a lot of creature cyclers, and that we would be a very creature focused deck.
Yeah, Street Wraith.
Yeah, Street Wraith, exactly. So yeah, we've got Gorex. The next one I want to point out is Yahini, Undying Partisan. I'm not hyper bullish on this card. I know people are very excited about it. The ways that this card works with the sweepers is potentially very disgusting.
When it works extremely well.
It's gonna go hard as hell. Like this card with any sweeper in anything that causes like if we can get a -2/-2 off, or Evan Carr's Justice or a Pestilence, Yahini is going to get massive. If there's a TPI player or a gut player or an Abdo player, there's some potential there.
To me, this deck is just screaming, I'm going to get locked down by an arrest or reprobation or something like that. I love, there are so many commanders that are mono black that I would want to build, but they're +1/+1 counter based. Yeah. And it's just such a huge blow to the shins. Yaheni's pace and how fast he can build back up +1/+ counters is a big thing in his favor, and I think it makes him one of the best mono black +1/+1 counter options there is. But I still think he's just begging to be bounced, pacifism,
bounding gold, or suppression, like in any sort of lockdown effect is going to be very hard on this commander. This does get around all of the except for Deep Freeze and Stasis Field, it gets around the sort of Frogify type creatures because you're gonna have counters, and so you're still gonna be big.
And some of them like Ignify that don't stop attacking and blocking it can also be okay with because it keeps the counters and can still be down a little bit. It's
exactly.
Still commander damage.
Yeah. I think that's
not where you want to be.
Yeah, I think this is gonna tend towards like this weird place where it's like kind of tough for it to be competitive because of how hard it gets locked down by like a Deep Freeze.
It seems very meta dependent.
And then on the other end, it's gonna probably be a card that casuals won't want to play with because it's gonna be like board wipe.deck, edict.deck, with Yahini at the helm.
Just face.
So I mean, this does work really well with your Fleshbag Marauders and all the other stuff, but I don't know. We'll see. Maybe somebody is able to figure it out. The haste is great. The fact that it grows passively basically is great. The built-in protection is great. It's just that there's certain elements of it that kind of fall a bit short. Were there any others in here that you were kind of looking to that caught your eye?
I mean, for mid power, sure, they all.
What about
look
cPDH?
A lot of fun. Yeah, for pretty much just Gorex and Gonti, I think, might be able to get there. I thought I heard you say you had some thoughts about Isareth. I think it's a little slow. I had a
Yeah.
blast with it in my brief time in Standard on Arena, playing like Golgari Ramp Stomp with that as one of my finishers, but do I think it? Am I
Isareth
wild
is,
about it here?
yeah. I mean, the Paying X, like I was excited that we might be able to do some reanimation stuff, but really, we're going to be wanting to pay like X is equal to 2 or 3, and that really limits us to these ETBs that aren't, that don't really work that great in the format, particularly like mass discard type stuff.
That's exactly where my head was going
Yeah.
to, just because I want to make it work so badly.
And that mass discard thing is not something that works terribly well. People will spend their cards in weird ways
Yeah,
to stop you from destroying their hand.
yeah.
Um,
And then also, it's just when you're destroying someone's hand, you're spending mana on things that they haven't spent mana on, so it can end up being this weird kind of tempo disadvantage as well. And with how the format's sped up, like I remember there was a debate like 6, 8 months ago on Twitter about how good are these burglar rat creatures, and I was still of the opinion that they were good, partially because I was still playing mid power and my meta was still a little slower at that time.
yeah,
And honestly, just the like even speeding up your average turn count in your meta by 1 is enough to drastically make a difference in whether those cards are worth it.
right. And the other thing is that these discard creatures will frequently discard interaction that you want at the table from your opponent's hands.
Yeah.
Yep, and it makes you responsible for having done that. And so I don't love it. If this was giving us the ability to reanimate something big, that would be a very different story. Repeatedly reanimating big things that we could put into the yard, like a Troll of Khazad-dûm or something like that, would be sweet. But that is not how this card works, and you also have to attack to do it.
I'm very much comparing this to Night Eyes the Desecrator. Which
Yep.
they both have hoops to jump through. Night Eyes, you have to transform it. This one, you have to pay variable mana and have attack. So you have to get things into the yard. You have to have things that are worth reanimating, and you have to keep Isareth alive through combat. Like the hoops start to add up that you have to jump through.
Totally. So Derpy Panda, just to clarify, when I'm talking about discard, I'm talking about mass discard. Yeah, like mass
things
discard.
That say each player.
Yeah,
each player,
and that's what we're talking about with the creatures that you bring back. Your burglar rats, your
virus beetle.
Yeah, the doom speaker, the virus beetle, things like that. The random discard, I think the only home that I think it's good in is, and this is a hypothesis, is in a combo deck where you empty everybody's hands because you're playing 3v1 anyways, and then you're using discard as a counterspell. So you run out all these discard effects, and you discard, and nobody has anything, and then you go for your combo.
When you say random, you mean you, the person causing it, don't have control over it?
That's right. Yeah, we're talking about
as opposed to like Skullrend.
Yeah, so we're talking about mass discard where your opponents have the choice of discarding what they want to. Cards like, you mentioned Thoughtseize and Inquisition. I actually think that cards like Duress are something that people ought to be considering for their decks as well, because discard in that capacity can be way, way more harsh on the player you actually care about. You don't really want to discard all the cards from all of your opponent's hands. That's not a game-winning strategy. But having the ability to snipe a Ghostly Flicker or a Displace out of somebody's hand, or some other important non-land or spell, that's really good. Alex says random discard is good in 60 card, I think, but in multiplayer formats, I've not been high on them. And Gator mentions Abdel Black. Yeah.
Where you can just reuse the rats repeatedly. And that's kind of what you're talking about with the combo.
Exactly.
Emptying their hands of interaction because you're ready to go.
Yeah, well, and it's because as a combo deck, you are 3v1 from the very beginning. So it actually makes a lot more sense. But for a lot of like control or grindy decks, making it 3v1 is not where you want to be, because you will probably end up losing that game. Um,
what you were saying about the removal aim that you wish were aimed at different players, I feel like that's very much from the perspective of a combo meta, because when you have a combat meta, everyone's things on the board are also doing that and
yep.
controlling who attacks where. So the resources in hand aren't the only way to control that.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I feel like if we last time we talked about like Viscopa and stuff, we talked about like the mixed meta we saw at RIW. I'm very curious to see if if the mixed meta ever penetrates into competitive to the point where combat mid range becomes more of a thing, becomes more of a presence of more constantly present, like it's something you count on to be in, every other pod you go into. Then I'm curious if that makes the discard effects more usable.
Interesting. Yeah, I think I tend to expect that there's going to be an aggro and a mid-range player in just about every pot. I think the data suggests that is the case. The one that we probably don't see as much of is like control,
Mm-hmm.
where you wouldn't expect a control player in every pod, but you probably will expect 1 to 2 combo players, and then 1 to 2 mid-range and aggro players at any given table. Combo just doesn't, or control just doesn't see
Right.
as much.
I'm
Yeah. Hmm.
So I guess what I'm saying is like we saw a lot more mid range at RIW, whereas I think from what I've seen, the online meta sounds like it's more hard aggro, hard combo.
And that's
And
interesting because in the online meta, um, we're we're moving towards using timers,
mhm.
round timers, but it's not been something we've been doing up until recently. Over in Sanctuary, they have timers there, and it's part of our plan in the connoisseurs to do the same thing, just so that we're operating on the same. Everybody's operating on the same wavelength.
Gonna end with the
And
Tortex problem where decks aren't popular because they're hard to make fit in the timer.
yeah, exactly. And also just as generally because we're playing competitive, and competitive implies that we're playing in some sort of a staked environment, or that we're aiming to play in some sort of a stakes environment at some point. And so the fact that there was a lot of mid range at RAW is really interesting because we actually had shorter. Um, we had clocks, and it was short. It was 80 minutes. So yeah, I think that the discard shells that are looking the most appealing to me might be something like your Sir Conrads. It's like your Abdels. It's
Except
maybe
for where
your
you've got synergy.
yeah, or like Possess Scab would be another one where instead of playing counter spells or a lot of them, you just play a lot of these blockers that also eat cards from your opponent's hand. You run everybody out of cards, and then you go for your Peregrine Drake combo, and
Yep.
and then you have less stuff you need to work through, and you have blockers. So, um, so that's kind of what we see here. There's a couple of other cards here that are interesting. Cabal Patriarch is interesting in that it is a repeatable source of removal in mono black. Um, I think that the 6 mana is a lot. It is a 5/5, which is big, but it's expensive as hell. This card is super pricey. You're not going to do
Yeah.
anything
And
with
not
this for
just
a
the
long
cost, it's
time.
also the abilities.
The activated abilities are rough. But repeatable removal in the command zone tends to be something that we need to watch out for.
Yeah.
And that certainly, if you were to get this online, you could definitely see this being a powerful control piece. Now, let's go and take a look at all of the cards that were printed that were black adjacent
Yep.
into uncommon,
Yeah,
and
we
that
got three.
is Ariel, Knight of Windgrace. This is one that we've talked about quite a bit
Yeah.
offline. Um, a 4 mana,
This is
4/4 vigilance Orzhov. You make 2/2s or you destroy creatures. Pretty sick.
so I'm excited about this one because I just having seen it in standard, I can kind of just like picture the game plan in my head where
Oh
you
yeah,
run a little bit of aggro just to keep on some pressure to make the 4/4 body of the commander matter more. and then you've got repeatable removal for disruption in the end game. But specifically looking at our format, you don't need X to be very big
No,
because,
the power.
like, yeah, you're focusing your proactive moves on building up a board that can compete with combat decks.
Yep.
Meanwhile, holding up that one black.
One black. That's it.
Yeah.
One black,
And
blow up your untapper. I mean, this card,
Yeah.
this is like the
if you
quintessential
have 3
Orzhov
knights,
mid-range.
yeah, 3 knights is all you need to take out most combo pieces.
Yep, yep. And even 3, I mean, I think it's mainly 2.
Might not be. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, or I mean, actually, there's, there's even the funny thing where they have like a pneumatic wall, and you activate it targeting the pneumatic wall, and they can't even like bounce or destroy the Wind Grace. Yeah, yeah. So I think this is probably the one of the better ones in the splashes of black. The fact that it has vigilance, the fact that it's a 4/4 for 4, it's on curve, it is defensive and aggressive. It produces bodies over and over and over again that also have vigilance, so it's a very hard deck to aggress on. And then it has repeatable removal. I mean, this deck is very interesting. Maybe we'll have to do a Let's Brew around, or a Let's Build around Ariel.
I think it's definitely one of those ones that I'm not sure if it can be competitive, but I think it's one that's definitely worth exploring.
Oh, it has all the ingredients to be competitive. I mean, it's just like, it's like if Denethor can work in a competitive environment, I can totally see it here. And this has like a lot of text on it that is very relevant.
To
repeatedly making bodies.
To me, what this is lacking is just a little bit stronger win con. I think you have to. I think when brewing this, you have to be very careful to keep your win con and continuing to progress towards that in mind.
Interesting. I mean, I don't know if I agree with that, because we're in black, and black has so many good ways to end the game, and this is actually giving us, like, the 2/2s are a way to win the game, right? You just keep making 2/2s and swing with Ariel and blow things up. I think that the win con is not as concerning to me in this, because you still have Pestilence and Crypt Rats. White now has, I can imagine that this probably plays some amount of rocks, so you could still play your all the glitters type stuff. Cranial Plating.
What I imagine is that this deck kind of has a little bit of similarity with Viscopa's problem of whoever the big combat deck at the table is, they are going to give you trouble because you're not playing the biggest creatures with this. You're playing Disruption, and you don't necessarily want to use up all your options for removal on the big creatures all the time so you can get through damage consistently.
Right.
Which means that person's still going to maintain a high life total, and therefore Crypt Rats and Pestilence aren't going to be as meaningful of win cons against them in particular, even if it's killing the other 2 people at the table.
Yeah. I think I'm pretty bullish on this. This is a lot of text on a card. This is definitely a commander that I would expect to see do well. I mean, these 2/2s have vigilance too. And yeah,
which
like,
is very important with having to tap them.
Oh, for sure. And there's a world where you blow up genuinely big things with this ability. I don't know. The problem I could see with Ariel is that people see this repeat source of removal and they interact with it.
And I definitely think you need a ramp element in this deck because, they're going to get removed. It's removal on the command side. You know, like Armix gets blown up a million times.
Yep, it does. It does. Now, I think this card, if we're not producing a ton of knights, is going to be looked at as a way to hold down combo, right? Yeah. But if you start making a lot of knights, then people are going to start seeing their stuff and realizing, oh, they can kill my thing too. So there is a mind game to be played here where you don't really want to go too deep into the knights. You just want to have that ability to interact with people.
I'm also interested in White has some combat untappers, whether it's on attack or on combat damage to a player, they untap a target creature.
Yep.
And I'm also interested in the sprinkling of those to try to make, it won't work on big things, but you could do it to where you tap 3 of your knights to blow up a medium-sized threat like Ingenious Artillerist or something like
Yep.
that, and then you have your untap, so now you can hold it up during someone else's turn to
Yeah.
defend against another combo.
Yeah, absolutely. And the mana rocks that we just talked about, interacting with all the glitters as well as cranial plating, are really good in this deck because there's a mana sink, right? There's like a thing that we can do regardless of whether we want to cast our spells or not. We can just make 2/2s or we can blow things up. So it's going to do well with a lot of mana. So
And a little equipment goes a long way with
it does. Yeah, for sure. So the other ones are Judith. I think you talked about it as a worse Mayhem Devil. I think that's a perfectly reasonable description for it.
But it only triggers on yours.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. And then we have Tygam, Sidisi's Hand, which
I use it in EDH, and even there, it just feels clunky.
I mean,
like,
yeah, it's like it has good things, but I don't know.
I've wanted to love the repeatable removal aspect in theory, but even with all the ramp and slower games in a casual EDH meta, I've never really been able to activate it more than once in a game.
Yeah.
And I don't think it being your commander is actually going to help with that much.
It's actually going to make it worse. It's going to mean that people look at it and say, I need to interact with this or my stuff is going to die turn after turn. And it's 5 mana. So it's like pretty expensive if your opponents like go to kill it and then you have to replay it and you have to wait a whole turn to activate it again. It's just clunky. It's just clunky. It's in Dimir. It is removal on a commander. It does help with card selection. But yeah, I mean, it's kind of wonky. So
the big upside where that might make it worth it is it's got a decent body.
Yeah, 3/4 is fine. It's a human wizard, relevant creature types, and it does feed your graveyard. So probably reasonable, but like not something that I'm like diving for.
Can you look up Mindrack Harpy real quick?
Yes.
So on the subject of mill, we have a ton of decent WR. We have a large amount of like repeatable small amounts of mill, and we have a good amount of single time good chunks of mill, like mill 4. But honestly, what I think we would need to make something like Tygam work is more copies of cards like Mindrack Harpy, where it doesn't even have to be this massive, but like 2-3 cards a turn that's repeatable. And those could make that repeatable removal more achievable, even despite Grave Hate.
Yep, I agree. Yeah, and even then, we're talking about a 4 mana 3/2 flying. It's a little dying to sweepers and all that stuff. So I think this has been. So we've covered our commons, we've covered our uncommons. Now
all left is colorless.
Yeah, the only thing left is colorless. And
you can just do ID equals 0.
ID equals 0 or color equals colorless.
Well, that gets you stuff with colored activation cost.
It doesn't.
Whereas
actually.
ID equals 0.
ID equals 0. That's a thing.
Yep. So you can use less than and greater than with your ID. So like if you don't want a specific color combination, but you want 3 colors or more, you can do like ID greater than 2, and it will give you things with a color identity that's more than 2 colors.
Yeah, I had a couple of other things messed up here too.
Okay.
Yeah. So in common for the downshifts, I don't believe this was this was a downshift. Yep. Brass Knuckles here, 4 mana. We're going to give double strike as long as we have 2 equipment, and it feeds itself. So we get a copy. So you're going to have a copy of Brass Knuckles. You equip both of them on, and then you'll be able to double strike. This is the first time we've ever had double strike on an equipment that was in this format.
It's the first time we have had double strike for a non-commander.
Yeah.
That you could consistently have every turn outside of red. Like the only other thing that got close was Springjack Knight in white, but that was like clash with someone, and if you win, you give double strike to target creature.
Yeah, and the fact is too is that if you're in a deck that has more equipment than just this, then it's basically uncounterable.
Oh yeah, because of the token.
Yeah, because you're creating a copy token. If you're in a deck where this is one of the only equipments you have, you can counter one of the copies to kind of
Hmm.
turn it off.
Yep.
But Double Strike is really strong.
Yeah.
This is already in Sailor's Bane as a way
I
to
was
one-shot people.
I was kind of curious whether it would ever make its way into Malcolm decks, specifically because the treasure Malcolm generates, if you aren't anywhere near your combo, could pay for that hefty 4
Yeah,
cost for
yeah,
this.
yeah.
And specifically, like Malcolm Kedis, okay, you're giving Double Strike,
Whew.
you're getting a metric shit ton of treasure. Or Malcolm Dargo, okay, equip it to Malcolm if you need more treasure. Equip it to Dargo if you just really want to end someone.
Yeah.
Like,
Or
yeah,
Oxida
there's just
Finisher,
yeah.
or
Or
yeah.
breaches gets you additional card advantage.
I mean, this card goes in so many different decks.
Yeah,
You could put this in Crackling Drake. You can put this in Night Veil Predator. You can put it
yep,
in Oxida Finisher, Sailor's Bane. You can put it in Ghost decks that want to hit
yeah.
people to generate card advantage. You can any sort of combat damage trigger that you'd like to double up on is a possibility as well, and it's pretty reasonably costed. The equip for one is the most exciting part because
If they had
equipments
made it
are
equip
all about the
too,
long game anyways, because you're like, yeah, you can kill my thing, but I'm going to continue to equip this equipment to it. And so that
if they
means
had
to
made it,
re-equip it for one multiple times is like way better than if it was 1 mana and 4 to equip,
if
right?
they had made it two to equip with the same cost, I think all of us would be a lot less excited about it. I think the affordability of the equip cost is what makes this
That's
card.
a huge deal. Yeah, I totally agree. So Brass Knuckles is great. I like this card quite a lot. The next one that I think is really big is Firemind Vessel. This is
Yeah,
our next
to me, it's
copy of Soul of like Urgolem's Eye and
Sistay's
Sisay's
Ring
Ring,
and
um,
Everflowing
and
Chalice.
Everflowing Chalice. Yep, and
To
we
me, to me, this is pretty niche. The coming in tapped really hurts because so much of the time when you're playing these 4 drop things, it's the first turn you can double spell, and the only thing that allows that is the 2 additional mana you get from the rock you just played.
I do find frequently that with those rocks that I'm not able to cast anything off of them. So I'm
Where
not
so
I'm not
the
upset
only
about the
place
tapped part of it, I guess.
the only place I'm playing them is in really really ramp hungry decks. So usually I'm trying to use that other 2 to pay for another piece of ramp
Yeah, if you
or
draw it mid game or late game.
yeah. So the one place where this really makes sense to me is Viscopa because it's so colored mana hungry. But even then, that tapped is going to put it right on the edge of getting cut already.
Now, two different colors. What does
Yeah,
that mean for monocolored decks?
I believe that means you only get 1 mana. Or no, you can add whatever color. Sorry, I'm thinking old EDH rules. Well, even then it wouldn't be converted. So yeah, I mean, monocolored decks usually don't have that much trouble generating the color they want anyway. It only gets in the way of things like Crypt Rats and Pestilence.
Right. So this can't produce. It has to produce colored mana. So in a monocolored deck, you're only getting 1 mana
I
out of
mean,
this.
it's not like we have many Eldrazi where we really care about getting the colorless.
Well, I guess what I'm saying is like, does this only produce 1 mana if you're in a
No, it
monocolored deck?
produces 2. Like if you're in a mono black deck, you still produce like a white and a black. It's fine. The white might as well be colorless for you.
Got it.
But
Oh, I see. I see. Yeah, yeah, yeah. So yeah,
whereas
fire.
like if it were the old EDH rules of you can't produce mana of other colors, or like I think for a while there was a rule that like any mana you produced of another color, it was converted to your commander's mana cost. Then I think this gets funky, but as
Yeah,
as rules have been for a while, no, you get to.
I would say this is also quite good in Aethersworn Sphinx.
Mm-hmm.
Um, there's a lot of good homes for this, I think. Any of the big blue decks, any big black, any big anything is going to be looking at Sisay's Ring, Urgolem's Eye, and Firemind Vessel um,
I
to
I
feed them.
think mid range has trouble with the tempo loss from it being tapped. I think combo
Yeah,
might be able to
maybe.
stomach it. I think combo. Sorry, I
Hmm.
think control can stomach that tempo loss better.
Yeah, yeah. I don't find myself in mid range playing these cards.
Yeah,
Um, in Control, I do. And in those decks, I'm kind of taking the turn off to ramp anyways, because these cards kind of read, I can pay for my commander twice now.
Mhm.
So these cards also kind of translate to saying like, my opponent is, or my commander's not appealing to kill anymore.
I guess my take on this is I don't think there's any deck where this is replacing Golem's Eye or Sisay's Ring.
It'll be an addition to.
Yeah.
Yeah, this will go in probably go in Avalanche Caller, as a great home for it as well. The other two that we have are a question mark and I don't care.
So wait. Okay.
Yep.
So Volshock Battle Gear. I not competitive, but the one little thing I have to throw in there where you could consider it is all the 1 and 2 butts that are in danger from wipes. Even a one butt is completely out of wipe territory with that thing on it, other than Crypt Rats or Pestilence.
Yep. Yeah,
Just
I mean it's a 6 mana +3/+3.
Yeah. Considering that 3 equip cost has been things that were like amorphous acts up till now, like +3/+0. The stats from Battle Gear
it's better.
Very sizable.
It's better.
Yeah.
There's just not a lot of decks that I can envision wanting it.
Yeah.
And
too slow for competitive.
Too slow for competitive. Yeah.
I absolutely adore that we have this from Mid-Power.
And I don't think that like slow cards are unplayable in competitive, but what I mean by slow is that it's 6 mana for +3/+3. That's not a good rate. And yeah, you get to pay 3 to give +3/+3 every turn, but like equipment is kind of like a creature that doesn't die. And so we're constantly getting to put 3 power into play for 3 mana, which is on rate, but you had to pay 3 for it at the beginning as well just to get it. So it's tragic.
Where I see Volshock Battle Gear coming into play is with white cantrip creatures.
Huh. So like a Spirited Companion?
Or what's the Overseer, the 2/1 with flying that ETB draws?
Inspiring Overseer?
Yeah. Smacking someone for 5? That sounds good.
Yeah, it's something you can do. I certainly won't be doing it. I think we got Bone Splitter for that, but I can see how the relevance of adding power and toughness does make it harder to kill the thing. It's just so much mana. That's the hard part. Campfire. I don't know how to parse this card. No, I'm not down on it. I just don't understand. I get that you are able to reuse your commander when it's expensive.
There's 3 parts to it.
Negating life.
Well, 4 parts actually. Cheap artifact. Lots of decks care about that.
Tutorable with Trinket Mage.
Yep. Life gain. I am very much considering putting this in Vizkopa. It's right on the line of, how much mana you want to pay for life gain for that deck. But it's so cheap, and it means that any leftover mana you have, bam, life gain keeping you alive. Then it's so incidental life gain for any spare mana you have. If you are any kind of controlling at instant speed, that is a great place to put your unused mana. The other 2 parts are, sure, you can get your commander back, or you can shuffle your graveyard into your library. That's where I really see this being useful. Like, we've heard talk in the past of, like, in very combo control metas, lots of Tatiovas. Oh, we had a game where someone had to use Shoreline Ranger to beat someone down with a Tatiova deck because everyone's Peregrine Drakes were exiled. Well, this is how you stop your combo piece in the graveyard from getting exiled. You put it back in your deck.
Yep.
So is that the only reason you're going to have it in a deck? Probably not. But if you can use 2 out of 4 of the things we just mentioned, it's worth considering.
And Vizkopa, in Vizkopa, the ability to end of turn, return it to your hand so that your Vizkopa is very cheap to cast is an option.
If there's an Arenas player across the table that just has been driving up your cost, and Vizkopa is going to cost 10, and that's going to be what stops you from comboing, well, it's not going to be stopping you anymore.
Yeah. I think Vizkopa seems like a fine home for it. 1 mana for 2 life is a 1-to-2 ratio, which isn't fantastic, but it's cheap. and
Yeah.
being able to cheat cast our commander for cheap means more activations,
Yeah.
which means more life drain.
Shout out to Gator. He seemed to be on the. I think it was no, it was Puzzle. Puzzle was on the same page as me, absolutely loving it. He was saying it's in his Tashar deck because cares about artifact, and then the incidental life gain is nice for keeping a combo deck alive.
Yeah, yeah. There's another element of this too, which is that we had Clay here asking, isn't it our first reshuffle ability?
No,
we've had Felden's Cane. We have Clear the Mind. There's not a ton of them though. It is a rare effect. Not rare rarity, but you know.
This is the first one that isn't awkward in its cost and has other uses. Like Clear the Mind has a little bit of other use, but it's a little more expensive than you really want to be holding up for graveyard reshuffling.
When people start playing that card in their deck, I'll believe people when they say that it's worth playing.
Yeah,
but they
exactly.
don't.
And then Feldon's Cane is just awkward because it doesn't do anything but reshuffling and being a cheap artifact.
Yeah. So possible applications for this here. This one is one to watch. I think that there's potential here for I don't know. I mean, it's a weird card. It has a weird effect. It's just something to pay attention to. So
on the more casual side of things, I think there are some ETB and Death Trigger things that they really are limited by how much they can afford to recast their commander, and I think it'll see play in those decks.
Yeah.
Just bringing up the floor of the format, not raising the ceiling.
Totally. Yeah, so of the cards that we reviewed, which one is your favorite, and which one do you think is the most powerful? And this is all subjective. I should say there's a lot of really powerful cards we got.
Looking over our list to make sure I don't forget anything. Favorite commander is definitely Gorax.
Yeah,
that's going to be so unique and interesting. Favorite common is definitely Dread Return. I don't think anyone can debate that. Like, it's just so much more than
it's so sick.
What we expected to get out of the set.
Yeah. There's so many applications for it, right? Like, it's pushed.
Yeah.
But
and then colorless, it's a tie between Campfire and Brass Knuckles for me.
Yeah, Brass Knuckles is very exciting. Getting double strike signifies that maybe in the future we get something like Lifelink on a colorless artifact as well, which would be great. I think that would be very, very cool to get something like that.
I think Lifelink on a generic colorless equipment would be incredibly powerful. I kind of wonder if they would do like, when this deals combat damage, you gain 1 or 2 life, like it's a set finite amount. I could see that being like this intermediate step if they want to toe the line.
Do you think we'll ever get Basilisk Collar?
No, I don't think we should.
I mean, so there, but there's a difference there. You're saying that
giving
we should
Death Touch.
Giving
Death Touch to colorless stuff is dangerous.
I mean, we just got Dread Return. I mean, this is the thing that people, like when we're talking about the cards, there's like, should we get this card? Could we get this card? Will we get this card? Zombify? I think we will get Zombify someday.
Yeah, absolutely.
4 mana, return a creature from your graveyard to the battlefield. It's a travesty we don't have it already. A card like Reanimate. Should we get that card? Probably not. Will we get that card? Probably not. Could we get it? Probably not. Right? Like 1 mana, bring a creature back, too much. What about Phyrexian Delver, though? Like Phyrexian Delver, 5 mana, 3/2, I want to say. You return target creature from your graveyard to the battlefield. You lose life equal to its mana cost, I think. That one?
I still think that one's not likely. Maybe as a commander. But
I think the drawback on it is enough that we could totally see it. And it would still be powerful. Still be powerful, right? But I think those are the kind of the questions that we need to ask is like, it's just like, is this a reasonable downshift? And then is there potential for it? And Dread Return feels like a card that was like way past all that. Monastery Swift Spear being another one.
I think that things like Basilisk Collar, I would be very surprised because the other equipment that they have put similar abilities on, such as what was it? Was it Heliod's Spear? No, Shadow Spear. There, there was another equipment that had like instant speed, grave hate, but it also gave Basilisk Collar abilities, like those kind of keywords. And just in my head,
Was it
what I'm
Lion
seeing.
Sash?
No, that one's a protection spell.
No, Lion
Uh,
Sash is the one that exiles cards out of the graveyard, while also being equipment.
oh, you're right. The thing I'm thinking of is maybe it's indestructible hate.
Oh, you turn off hexproof on something. That's Shadow Spear. Yeah,
There we go. Thank you.
yeah, yeah.
So Shadow Spear also gives
+1/+1 and trample and lifelink.
and lifelink.
Yeah,
So the equipment that are giving specifically lifelink and death touch, it seems like those have been trending up in rarity, not down,
yeah,
from
that's
what I've
possible.
been seeing over the
Yeah,
past 2 or
and
3
maybe
years.
it's not Basilisk Collar specifically, but I think it's
Yeah.
quite possible that we'll get a lifelink as well as a death touch equipment at some point, and it'll probably be like Brass Knuckles, where it's like expensive. Like Brass Knuckles is not likely to come down and be equipped in the same turn.
Mhm.
It'll maybe 50% of the time it'll come down, they'll equip both of them, and then they'll go and they'll hit people with it. But I think in a lot of cases it'll be like you play it and then you need to
But
wait
like,
till your next turn, you know.
but Basilisk Collar, where it's so incredibly cheap, I don't think we ever should get
Yeah,
that.
it would have to be. I think it's not likely that we get Basilisk Collar specifically, but we may get something that has those keywords and is just more expensive. So, well, with that said, we've covered a lot of ground. We've got a lot of really cool cards in this set. Uh, we've gotten a number of new commanders just in black. We have a number of, yeah, we really have like how many is it exactly? We got 10 cards and all of them are playable. That's the
Yeah.
very interesting thing. We got 10 downshifts and they're all playable. And we have 5 of them that are generically just very good.
And
Or maybe it's 4
and
that are
of the
yeah.
of the commanders, it seems like all of them are playable too. Like there's not a single card that was downshifted in black or colorless, or even the multicolor option that we saw that won't see play. You know, including mid power.
Yeah, totally. And that's all very exciting for the format. I really am pleased to see that Wizards, was courageous around raising the floor on the commons and really bringing in some powerful stuff into the format. Pauper and Pauper adjacent formats have always been powerful
Red-headed
formats.
stepchild.
And so it feels really cool that we're getting cards like Dread Return and Demon's Disciple and the Phyrexian Gargantua and Drown in Sorrow, and the implications of this format are going to be very far-reaching into the future, when we look back. I think what you said about this being comparable to Baldur's Gate, but more for the 99. I think that certainly applies. So with that, I think we're going to wrap things up here. I do want to give everybody an opportunity to take a look at our Patreon here. Let me pull this over. Let's see. Let's see. Have to make sure we don't dox anybody. That's very important. So go over to Patreon here. There we go. If you're interested in supporting the content, supporting Clay and I in our mission through the multiverse to explore Pauper Commander at the competitive level at in every possible way, by bringing on these great co-hosts, we ask you to take a look at our different membership options from $2, $5, $10, $20, and $50 a month, which get you access to an exclusive part of the Discord. You can get templates like this one here. You can get member shoutouts. You can get active ability to participate in the Let's Build prior to it dropping and actually see the conversations that I have with the people that I bring on. And of course, early access to the videos that we drop that are edits. So if any of that is interesting to you, please do let us know, and we're happy to find a membership level that works for you. I do want to also thank our current patrons for their contributions. We have the PDH pod, Sanctuary PDH, Jack, Eric, Adgan, Jerry, Zach, Scooby, Chris, Mizu, William, Paul, Corey, Derek, Devin, Ian, Bobby, Jin Shooting Star, and Noyark. Thank you everybody for your contributions. I really appreciate the financial support, and it really helps us validate that we're doing the right thing. So that feels really good whenever we get that. And Scarecrow, thank you so much for joining us once again. It's great to have a little double trouble with you since our last video. So thank you.
Thanks for having me back. It was fun.
Yeah, fantastic. Well, with that, I think we're going to sign off. So, Connoisseurs of Fine Common Cardboard, thank you so much for joining us today. Thank you, Winfro. Great to see you there. And we'll hope you have a good rest of your day, and we'll catch you on the battlefield. Peace out.